Cool. Thanks for coming, everyone. I know this is the last day we're here since we've transitioned to the 3 days for the summit this go-round. Especially since this talk is after lunch, I imagine a lot of you are full. If you're leaving today, I'm assuming you might be anxious to get home. So we really appreciate you showing up and coming to hear what we have to say today. I'm Steve Wilkerson.
I'm Megan Heisler.
And our presentation is called Always Two There Are. We're going to talk a little bit about mentoring today. Just full disclosure though, if you came here expecting like dank Star Wars memes because of the presentation title, you might be a little disappointed. There might be some Game of Thrones spoilers though. It's just going to be a black slide. That's a bad joke. Okay, you want to introduce yourself, Meg?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start it off. So my name is Megan Heisler. These are some of my likes. Obviously, I'm very upset right now. Pittsburgh Penguins are not in the running for the Stanley Cup anymore. It's very sad. Some of my dislikes, having no one to ask for help. I really don't like it when I don't know where to go for help. I don't like when I'm thrown to the sharks and just expected to know everything. I really don't like it when I get so frustrated that I just give up because I have no idea what's going on and I don't think I ever will. And then, obviously, I'm still upset about the Stanley Cup.
What about some of your other likes? You skipped over the...
Oh, well, I skipped over my cats because I love them. And I also like going to the gym a lot.
It's respectable. All right, as I said, my name's Steve. I'm a senior member of technical staff at AT&T. Some of the things I really like motorcycles. I like to talk about them a lot. As of Friday, before coming here, I bought my 7th motorcycle. So I've got quite the collection in my garage, and it's the one that I've been wanting forever. So I told my wife that finally I'll stop trying to buy them because I have all of the ones I need. Also, I like tattoos. If it's not obvious, they're kind of out for everyone to see. It's just something I've really enjoyed. I found an artist who's really great and does the style that I like, so it ties in with the tattoos that I really like. A lot like Meg, I also like my cat. She's a very opinionated, I'll say, Tonkinese cat. She tells me what to do all the time, and I do it because things end badly if I don't. But really, I like helping those around me succeed, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today. The things I really dislike, group text late at night, I absolutely despise it. I have a group of friends who like to create a new group text for every new event we're doing, and it gets out of hand, so I think I have more conversations muted than not on my phone at any given time. But I also really dislike knowledge silos, and I really hate doing all the work. So those last two things kind of tie into this a little bit. You want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so in college, I was kind of constantly looking at new technologies and finding ones that excited me. But I never actually contributed to anything. I started working with containers very quickly when I heard the hype on them. And later I heard briefly about this thing called Kubernetes, didn't quite know what it was. I started working on a school project where I met Steve, and I had never heard of OpenStack or had any exposure to any sort of cloud technologies. Then after graduating, I was very fortunate in that I began working at a place that actively contributes to OpenStack. I started slowly by just learning how to run scripts, set up an environment, learning about what the different OpenStack services were, and what they do, and all of the dependencies. Sorry, I lost my place. So I didn't actually work on anything right away, and then I joined the team that works on Openstack-Helm. I kind of started learning about Helm charts and thought they were just the coolest thing ever because all of a sudden you could get an environment up with a few scripts. So I think there's such power in the combination of OpenStack and Helm, and I knew that that was the team I wanted to work with. So I started working on Helm Infra, and mostly in LMA. So I'm continuing to learn so much that way. A few months ago, Steve suggested that I put in an application to speak at the summit. I was terrified. So I heard somebody else who was putting in an application. My name was put on the application for a network policy talk, which I actually knew something about. So then the application was accepted, and I had to come here and I had to speak, which I did that yesterday for the very first time. So now I'm giving my second talk, and still slightly terrifying, but less so.
All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. So I was looking for a word that fit the opposite of newbie really well, since I put Meg as the newbie on the slide, and then I found a nobie. And I thought that kind of sounded cool and also kind of tied into the Star Wars thing, but I resisted putting Obi-Wan Kenobi on there. I'm sure you appreciate that, but like I said, no dank memes or jokes. So a little bit about me. My first exposure to OpenStack was in roughly July of 2015. I started at AT&T right out of college, and the computer science program I was in for my undergrad was very Java focused. So your first year and a half was Java, and then after that they didn't care what you used, but after using Java for a year and a half, it was like, well, I'm just going to keep using it because it's what I know, and at the time I thought it was the best thing in the world. So my plan after college was I'm going to be the best Java developer that St. Louis has ever seen. Instead, I ended up working in what was called then AT&T's integrated cloud, AT&T's private OpenStack cloud. I had never worked with infrastructure before. I had never written Python in any capacity, and I had not contributed a single line of code or documentation to an open source project at the time. My dreams of being the Vladimir Tarasenko of St. Louis, but for Java, had been absolutely crushed. But I'm glad they were. I had the opportunity to be part of AT&T's OpenStack community team, which allowed me to explore and contribute to upstream OpenStack projects with the ultimate goal to add value to AT&T's downstream efforts in the future. I attended my first OpenStack Summit in 2016 in Austin. At the time, it blew my mind that there were so many people there that it was difficult to walk through the hallways. And the energy there was awesome, and it was a great experience. For a first convention right out of school, being there for work too is pretty nice that AT&T paid for it. I gave my first presentation at a summit in Barcelona in 2016. It was my first time leaving the United States, and I couldn't have asked for a better destination with a better group of people, both colleagues and people that I had known and met through working in various projects upstream. But the ultimate best part was finally putting faces to the names of the people that I had been interacting with over the course of the last year or so. As for the first time I felt like I really truly understood OpenStack, I'll have to get back to you on that one when it happens. I haven't quite figured it, haven't got there yet. When I first started working on OpenStack, the suggestion at the time for anyone I had talked to was try to find some of the low-hanging fruit bugs that were on Launchpad. Figured that would give me a chance to get more familiar with both Python and how OpenStack itself worked, both functionally as well as how the community worked. Ultimately, I felt that approach, though, the best takeaway I had was how much I loved using the Garrett workflow over using over GitHub. So there's something to come out of that, I suppose. But while it did help me get familiar with how the community operated, I didn't really find a project that spoke to me and that I felt I really wanted to be a part of. The project that interested me the most at the time was probably Watcher, but I dabbled a little bit in Magnum as well. In the summer of 2016 is when I started to notice the hype surrounding containers. So I started looking at the Cola project and decided that's where I wanted to try and focus my efforts and quit trying to be all over the place at the same time. Not long afterwards, I noticed there was a project under the Cola umbrella that focused on deploying OpenStack on top of Kubernetes, and I naively thought, man, this is awesome. OpenStack, containers, and Kubernetes, how hard could this really be? Spoilers, it can be hard. But it was at the OpenStack Summit in Barcelona in 2016, as I mentioned, finally being able to put faces to the names that I've been working with. My main takeaway is I realized those people were just people. They weren't intimidating supernatural beings who understood everything, and I had no hope of understanding the things that they do. And that's when things really kind of started to click into place for me. I was later nominated for the Colo Kubernetes core reviewer team in 2017. I worked on that for a while, and today I'm a core reviewer and an individual contributor to the Openstack-Helm project. So, now that we've introduced ourselves and you got an idea of who we are, and we've given you some perspective on our experiences with OpenStack to date, we're going to get to the juicy parts and why we feel mentoring upstream is important, which is, I assume, why you're here. Ultimately, in my opinion, I feel that mentoring individual contributors upstream adds value both to the open infrastructure community and the individual projects that make up this diverse infrastructure ecosystem we've come to love and sometimes love to hate. This value comes in many forms. One of those, I believe, is growing the number of individual contributors helps drive these projects forward through more diverse reviews, contributions, and viewpoints. By expanding that diversity, we're able to expand, ultimately, the diversity of opinions for the open infrastructure project as a whole, with the goal of, as soon as we start, at least in my opinion, as we grow the diverse opinions that we have, it should hopefully start to attract additional individual contributors as our solutions expand to cover more use cases. Upstream mentoring also helps us grow the expertise the community needs. Ultimately, the technical expertise required to work with the technologies that make up the projects under the open infrastructure umbrella, it can be pretty vast. That technical expertise then helps us drive the projects themselves forward. Deployment projects especially, such as Openstack-Helm and Colo Kubernetes and some of the others that I've worked with in the past, also require a working understanding of technologies that extend beyond just OpenStack. To successfully drive these projects forwards toward their medium and long-term goals, it only makes sense to invest our time in helping our individual contributors grow the technical skills required to do so. Active mentoring also helps lower the barrier to entry for individuals looking to contribute to open infrastructure projects. Speaking from experience, finding projects and work that align with personal or work interests can prove difficult if you have little to no experience with what the community has to offer. The first question I always ask when someone expresses interest in working with Openstack-Helm is, what interests and excites you? I ask this question because I found that if there's no interest or excitement for the work you're looking to do, it often leads to frustration when you start running into problems in difficult situations and you just walk away from the project entirely. In addition to helping find work that aligns with interest, active mentoring can help ensure new contributors are visible to the larger project teams and community. Once again, my personal experience has been that once I felt included and comfortable with the Colo project team in particular, my engagement and contributions accelerated rapidly from that point. You want to talk a little bit about your experience?
So as a new developer, fresh out of college, coming into any new team can be very intimidating. Everyone around kind of knows so much more than you, and you feel that you're an imposter with so much to learn. There's just no way you can learn everything that they know, and you're under the impression that that knowledge is somehow inherent to them, and they just get it, and you just never will. Now, magnify that and add people you don't interact with face-to-face, and you have what it's like to enter a community of OpenStack or any open source project. It's very intimidating. You don't know who to turn to or what questions to even ask. So contributing to an upstream project is so much more than just being added to a new team. There are now people all over the world that you have to deal with. It's a lot. Having another person act as a mentor is like having an interpreter. It provides someone you can ask questions to without worrying if they're going to think you just have no idea what you are doing. A mentor provides a way to get involved and helps remove so much of the anxiety that often comes with doing so. It's really just having a kind of cushion that you get to bounce some ideas off of to check your understanding. But not only that, it changes the entire experience from a scary one to one that definitely seems manageable. There are a lot of important conversations that happen around a project, from weekly meetings to attending summits. A lot goes on around the project that you can easily miss if you don't know it's happening. Having a mentor help me be active in meetings, push me to do things like submit and then give my first talk. So there's all these things that happen. You don't necessarily know that they're going on. When you find out they're going on, you don't think that you have any reason to be involved, because obviously you know nothing, so what could you contribute? But it's really important to be a part of that conversation. Having a mentor to push you to do that is very helpful.
Cool. So I'll talk a little bit about my experience when it comes to mentoring upstream. After reflecting on my experience with previously, the OpenStack community and now the open infrastructure community over the past 4 years, the experiences I've had during that time was the primary driver for wanting to submit this talk. The following points are the ones that really stick out in my mind, thinking back over what's happened over the last 4 years or so. Biggest one is time constraints. Most of us have day jobs, families, and hobbies that may not include hacking away at the keyboard. Because of that, finding time for active mentoring can be a challenge. I found that carving out time for that active mentoring, though, has worked the best for me, as I'm historically terrible at saying, time isn't an issue, so I'll just do this mentoring thing live. If you want to be a successful mentor, though, or mentee even, my advice is simple. As with testing and production, don't do it. I've also found successful mentoring requires active commitment, both from the mentor and mentee. It's very easy to say, yeah, sure, I'd love to help you understand all this cool stuff. It's not really that hard, but it can be difficult to deliver on that promise. People learn in different ways, at different speeds, which means commitment to active mentoring requires more than a handful of quick IRC or Google Hangout chats. When our time constraints increase and we start wishing we had 25 hours in a given day to get everything done that we need to, it's often tempting to ease off things like mentoring as a way to get some of that time back. For those who have mentored me in the past, I'm really grateful that that wasn't their approach. As a mentee, I've been guilty of thinking also, this person is super busy doing super cool stuff, and because they're doing all this super cool stuff and they're super busy, I don't want to get in the way of that, so I'm just going to leave them alone. Commitment has to be a two-way street for mentoring to succeed. And also as a mentor, I've noticed it's easy to overlook the differences in the technical proficiencies between myself and someone I'm working to mentor. It wasn't uncommon for me in the past to take the years of experience I have for granted and just assume everyone at least knew half or more of what I do. Remember the question earlier that I said I like to ask each new individual contributor who reaches out to me. Asking about their interest and experience provides me an entry point for digging deeper into what experience a potential mentee has. I found that being proactive about that and managing those expectations has worked the best for having successful mentor-mentee relationships. You want to step in?
So now that we've talked about mentoring upstream, let's talk about why it's equally as important to have a mentor sort of in your day job. Mentoring in the workplace goes just beyond helping with delivering day-to-day duties. Active workplace mentoring ultimately helps both mentees and mentors alike achieve their own personal career goals. Active workplace mentoring helps mentees attain and mature technical skills required to grow in their workplace. Mentoring helps maintain and mature the skills required to grow into a senior engineering role in the future. So the maturation of those technical skills may also help alleviate imposter syndrome, as most of us are likely familiar with. Mentoring also helps senior engineers grow their leadership and delegation skills, which may help them grow into leadership engineering or even management roles in the future. mentoring is also a sound business investment. Teams and enterprises cannot afford to lose their top engineering talent as the needs of the business evolve, especially in industries where disruptive technologies result in an extremely competitive pool of talent. Growing the talent through mentoring is a medium to long-term investment, but the return of that investment can be very high. Investment in mentoring is key to staying competitive and keeping employees happy. So in the long run, yes, mentoring can be an investment on behalf of, the company, but it pays out dividends later on. So this is sort of my mentoring experience in the workplace. It's been very unique. Steve sort of started off as my mentor during my last year of college, and I have been very fortunate to wind up working with him and to continue being his mentee. In college, I was fully prepared to just sort of accept the job that I was interning at on a project that really just didn't excite me, and I sort of went to 9 to 5 and said, okay, well, that's it. I'll never be excited about what I'm gonna do. I didn't think I was someone who was capable of contributing to something bigger. But having a mentor, I began to figure out almost everyone felt that same way. The difference was putting in the effort to put myself out there and learn something new. Without that push, I probably wouldn't have left my little bubble and would have thought I was not capable of anything else. I'm still nervous about submitting patch sets for review, but I'm a lot less nervous than I was previously. And I understand now that people on my project aren't sitting there silently judging me for not knowing all the answers, but are actually rooting for my success and happy to help when I have questions. I'm now able to actually go to other people when I have questions. If Steve is busy, and I'm happy to get reviews where people point things out that I can improve on. I've learned so much through mentoring, and I'm incredibly happy to continue to learn. I have now this group of people that I can draw knowledge from more than just what I started with. That is, I think, the biggest benefit of mentoring is the connections I have now made that I can go to and sort of draw on. So there are a lot of times where issues arise or defects occur in a workplace, and shadowing to fix them is probably the best way to learn how to deal with them in the future. Learning where to go to look for problems, what things to watch for and what they mean, how to interpret them is a very long process, and shadowing someone else who knows how to do it is a great way to figure it all out. Don't assume an answer to a question should be obvious. It has happened multiple times now where I have encountered an issue and get in my own head that I should be able to fix this without asking any questions, only to exhaust every avenue that I know, bring up the issue, and find out something else was going on that I didn't know about causing my issue. Because of that, I have to not be afraid to speak up. This is why it's really important to speak up and communicate. If my mentor doesn't know I'm struggling with an issue, he can't help me. So making sure I say something when it happens, or even if I figure it out later, but say, this was an issue for me, I figured it out, that sort of communication is very vital. And then it happens only occasionally, but there are times where sometimes my mentor is doing something that I sit there and go, I think it's supposed to go this way. So if I speak up at those points instead of sitting there silently, it's actually a good thing because I'm learning and we don't have to sit on the same issue forever. So learning learning the issue, seeing someone else make the same mistake and going, oh wait, I know that. That's a sign of progress and something I should be happy with, not internalize.
It's true. Cool. So I'm going to share a little bit about share some experience of mine with mentoring in the workplace. I was trying to find some really great memes to use for this presentation, and this one I think encapsulated my experience at AT&T when I first started perfectly. When I started there, I didn't have a mentor to really turn to, working on the community team that I mentioned, where my work was focused solely on upstream projects that I found interesting and thought might bring value back to the company down the road. I was fairly insulated from the internal development and deployment efforts of the business. Often I would find myself running into problems that I was too timid or afraid to ask for help with, as I didn't want to go and interrupt the guys who had been working 60, 70 hours a week trying to solve issues heading up to deadlines. Because in my mind, they're working to solve the real problems, and I'm sitting here, playing upstream and having a good time. Fast forward to now, though, I make it a point to actively help both junior members of staff and our organization, and also my peers who are working to understand the technologies we rely on for what our business is trying to achieve now. I can sympathize with my coworkers and peers because I remember how I felt when I first started, and I was this bear in this picture just sitting around thinking, I don't have a mentor here, I'm just gonna sit and wait until someone says something because I'm sure they can look at me and tell that I'm stuck. It wasn't the case. It was very easy to feel overwhelmed, and I try my hardest to see the signs of someone who may need help now, but like I did in the past, doesn't want to interrupt someone that seems too busy. Similar to my takeaways from downstream or upstream mentoring, I've got some downstream takeaways too after reflecting on the past 4 years. Some of these are fairly similar to my viewpoints on upstream mentoring, but have some slightly different context, of course. Time constraints, similar to upstream, can affect our ability to mentor our peers in the workplace. I feel the time constraints in the workplace can be more restrictive, as the time required to be successful often competes with the time required to meet the critical needs of the business during the 40 hours a week or so that we're in the office. Similar to before, it often becomes tempting to scale back your involvement with your mentees in the workplace. Once again, my advice is, if this can be avoided, don't do it. Found, like Meg said, bringing a mentee along for the ride when triaging and fixing critical issues in the workplace not only helps them learn the processes required for doing so, but also serves as a sanity check for yourself when you inevitably slip up and do something wrong and they point it out, which, as Meg said, it's progress. It's great. I won't lie, there's been a handful of times where that's happened, and I'm really glad she was able to catch me on that, because I feel like that helps reinforce the concepts that I've got and the things that I've learned, and it's a good feeling seeing your mentee catch on as well. As with upstream mentoring, differences in technical proficiency should be taken into account when mentoring in the workplace. My approach to addressing this in the workplace is the same as it is with upstream individual contributors. I like to find out what interests and excites someone I'm meant to mentor, and find ways to tie that back to the work they're doing if it's not exactly a perfect fit. I found that personal interests and the technology that we work with in our day-to-day jobs make work feel less like work, which is a good thing. Also, differences in work preferences can be a challenge. Different people like to work in different ways. I've had successful mentoring arrangements that involve pairing frequently with someone until they felt more confident and comfortable in their abilities. I've had situations where delegating tasks and activities to a more hands-off approach resulted in success where pairing had previously failed. I like to talk with mentees early to determine what works best for them. Is putting someone in an extremely uncomfortable situation that might not align with the way they like to work will almost never result in a successful outcome. For interested mentees, I highly suggest taking an active approach to finding mentors and coaching in the workplace. Meaningful mentoring arrangements aren't always part of a workplace's culture. Successful mentoring relies on active commitment from both parties, And I've always been enthusiastic and willing to help anyone who's approached me directly about mentoring because it shows me they take initiative in not only succeeding in their day-to-day job, but they want to actively manage their expectations for their long-term career goals. And finally, feedback is critical to determine the effectiveness of a mentoring arrangement, not just for the mentee, but for the mentor as well. The differences and challenges mentioned above will ultimately affect whether you can expect success in a mentoring relationship. Personally, much like software or software development, I prefer to fail fast and regular and get rapid, regular feedback from the individuals that I have these relationships in the workplace so I can course correct and find ways to augment that relationship with my mentee to make it successful. Because ultimately, if in the long run, if they're successful, everyone in our organization is successful, and it means I get less text messages and phone calls at night when things don't work. So there's some self-preservation in there as well, but mostly it's wanting to see everyone else succeed. I am extremely grateful for the experience I've had both upstream and downstream. Standing here 4 years later, after not just getting involved with OpenStack, but graduating college and getting my first job, I never thought I'd be standing up here talking about how I can help other people succeed in the workplace and how good of a feeling that is. I fully expected to be in a cubicle somewhere just hacking away at a keyboard all day, and I'm really happy that's not the case. So, yeah, thank you. That's it.
Any questions?
So I don't have a question per se, but I just want to, I can't plus one enough what you guys are talking about here, and I wanted to let you know that. Mentoring is super important, and you talked about the time trade-off at work between like doing the quote-unquote actual work, but I'm a firm believer that mentoring as a multiplier is way, way, way more valuable than just banging out code. So thanks for beating the drum. Thanks for taking it seriously. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I agree 100%. Thankfully, the organization that we work with and that we're a part of firmly believes the same thing. And it's just another thing that makes me extremely happy to be where I'm at right now. And I'm sure you might share those sentiments.
Yeah, without mentoring, I would definitely be sitting in a cubicle hacking away at something that, I know this for sure, and not trying to expand my knowledge at all. So I feel like I'm actively contributing to something now, and that's a great feeling. So.
Any advice for getting a mentorship program going at a company that doesn't currently have one?
That is, that's very difficult because while we don't have a formal mentoring program, it's very much in the culture of the organization that we're part of. So it's kind of hard for me to put myself in those shoes and give advice. I think the best way to approach it, though, ultimately is, pitching it is, in the terms of the business, it is a solid investment because, as was mentioned, I mean, the time you're putting forth in mentoring people and making sure they're not just able to contribute, but they understand that they don't have to be rock stars to add value. That really helps get over the hurdles where someone might feel they're inadequate or don't possess the skills or can develop those skills. But also, as Meg was mentioning, working in this industry where sometimes technology can be extremely disruptive and it's very hard to find the right people for the job, for the business, it makes it hard to transition to things that add value from a business sense if you're not able to grow the skills in the workplace to handle that, if you're not able to find them externally. I think that's probably the best way I could answer that. Yeah, it's a good question. If someone else has a better idea or some valid feedback, I think it'd be awesome to touch base and deal with.
So my company does have a formal mentoring program.
Awesome.
And I do a lot of mentoring for people on my team. And one of the elements that we have of that is we set up formal goals that are related to the mentoring that change each quarter to align with what we're doing that quarter. Have you guys done anything along the lines of setting formal goals as part of a mentoring program? And if so, have you found any goals that were particularly useful?
We don't have, as part of the mentorship efforts we do in our organization, we don't have goals. Usually my approach has always been to request a recurring one-on-one with anyone you're mentoring. That could be at whatever frequency they desire. It could be once a week, could be once every 2 weeks, could be once a month. It's really just whatever works for both parties and adds value. In the past, the mentoring relationships I've ended up establishing with individuals who came into our organization and some of the other people I've met upstream, I always, me personally at least, I always kept a curated list of the goals that I wanted to reach. So, for example, starting to get involved with Kubernetes and containers, I got involved with that right as I started trying to dive into OpenStack, so it was pretty daunting. But laying out those granular goals that made sense and a sequential effort, I guess, really helped. Because you can't swallow a whale whole, right? You gotta cut it up into bits. Do you have any opinions on that?
No. I mean, setting up goals, even just as a mentee yourself, and then again, communicating those clearly, I think has been the best way for me to sort of track my progress and saying, okay, well, I want to submit this many patches upstream, and oh, I did that, and I want to speak at the next summit, and oh, I was able to do that. Setting goals like that have been incredibly helpful and have definitely, in terms of imposter syndrome, that's the thing that makes me look back and realize, oh, wow, I've actually accomplished a lot. So it's really, asking people to set goals for themselves, I think, is helpful.
To the question on how does one set up a mentoring program successfully, as a former manager, myself and my management colleagues tried to do that exact same thing several different ways, and tried to combinations of forcing down you're assigned to this person, to having people sign up through a sign up sheet. And anyway, I don't think we ever really succeeded in finding something that didn't feel forced and artificial. And if anyone has had more success with that, I'd be really interested in hearing it. But I actually work for the same place as these guys, and I think Steve really captured it. It's the culture of the place that helps drive the behavior you want. You can sort of sell it to leadership as it's an investment, and it brings you business value, and it helps retain talent because it keeps people happy, and it increases skills that are hard to find in the marketplace. And those are all great ways to basically get permission to allow people to do this. But then the other part is encouraging it and rewarding it. If you allow people the time, you don't make them feel like they are taking time away from their actual job, but make them understand that it is an encouraged part of their job. I think that helps sort of foster that. And then when they do it, if you tell them they did a good job, and if you're in a management position, you're able to reward that kind of behavior, that sort of starts that cycle going.
I miss Manager Matt sometimes. He used to be my boss.
As a follow-up question, do you think it's easier to set up those programs within a given company versus within a given community? Like, is it easier to get management approval, for example, if you set it up within the same organization? How do you think it relates between community-driven and company-driven mentorship?
If you want my personal opinion, I think it's a lot easier to set up in an open source community. Trying to think of the right way to answer this in terms of the company perspective. In a large company that has many moving parts and many layers of reporting, as a Fortune 10 company like AT&T does, it can be pretty difficult because you can have informal mentoring programs set up at the organization level, but of course it ties back to what I was saying earlier, whereas time constraints get busy. If the workforce or the headcount on your team starts to reduce a bit, due to the needs of the business. Usually one of the first things that goes is, okay, well, I need you to devote all this time to picking up some of the extra work and focusing on delivering the software we need to deliver and operate the infrastructure we need to operate. And this mentoring thing, we can revisit this later. Personally, if I had my way, I would kind of set it up external to the workplace, so in this sense, the community, mostly because of the benefit that I have working in the organization that I do. The majority of us are working upstream in various projects anyway, whether it's OpenStack-Helm, Airship, or something else. So it's a lot easier to handle it that way, and that way we can help mentor our coworkers, but also mentor other individual contributors who might want to be involved with that effort as well. And then, since the people on our team are working upstream anyway, we're able to pull that value downstream, as it were, and take advantage of that.
So sort of to add to that and to wrap up, I attended today the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group, where it was discussed about mentorship and the programs that they're trying to set up. So if you are at all interested in mentoring, being a mentee even, please reach out to someone there. I know 2 people are sitting right here, so that's definitely a good first step to mentoring, especially in this community.
Cool. I think we're out of time.
Yep. out of
Thanks,
time.
everyone.
Thank you.